Well, everyone, I'm going to be honest here. I didn't really have any expectations going into Stellar Blade. With the state of AAA gaming right now in the industry, I had little faith in a team who was making their first console game. Definitely considering the game they released before this was a mobile gacha game, Goddess of Victory Nike, which to be fair, I really don't know anything about the game and what kind of quality gameplay experience it provides to the players, though I have seen a lot of jiggly ads for it, and they are something else to say the least. But with that said, Stellar Blade, despite some of the flaws I feel the game has, not only smashed any expectations I had from that initial reveal back in 2021 when it was known as Project Eve, it blew them out of the stratosphere. Stellar Blade should be the gold standard on what modern single-player AAA games should be. No microtransactions, flawless performance with various options to customize your gameplay experience, great visuals, and stellar music, just to name a few things. Shift Up really made a complete package of incredible quality, which as their first console game, it truly is impressive, at least to me. When I'm spending $70 on a game, this is what I expect. Definitely when it comes to what's always most important to me when it comes to games, which is the core gameplay mechanics you will be engaging with throughout a game, which with Stellar Blade would be the combat. And also, by the way, per usual, there will be some heavy spoilers throughout this review, so if you don't want nothing ruined, I would leave now. So the combat in Stellar Blade is pretty interesting, even though it really doesn't do anything original. I say that because as I made my way through the game, it almost feels like the combat evolves alongside Eve as she gets stronger and believes in herself more and more. At the beginning of the game, as the airborne squad is landing on the planet to fight Natibas, which is the prime threat in Stellar Blade for the most part, Eve spends those opening moments really relying on her friend Taki to guide her. She helps Eve escape the pod she's trapped in, fights alongside her, even sacrifices herself to save Eve, and even after that, Eve has to be saved again by Adam, or else she would have died in those opening moments, and I feel like the combat reflects this so much. Because at the start, the combat is super slow and methodical. You can't really be aggressive with Eve. Outside of some starting skills, you just have your basic light and heavy attacks with a decent set of combos but no range options, with little utility outside of the tumblers, which basically acts like an Estus flask from the Souls games, though with much more mobility. Then of course, even the various enhancements you can equip to Eve are super limited, because you see you have two types of enhancements you can equip to Eve. These are Exospines and Gears. Exospines have up to 3 effects based on how far they are upgraded, which features effects such as increasing shield generation while guarding, or magnets so you can use your skills an infinite number of times for a short period. Then the gears only have a single effect on each of them and can't be upgraded like Exospines. Instead, you have to find better versions of them in the world, which these have effects like increasing attack speed and reducing melee damage received. Basically, what I'm getting at is as you progress through the game and Eve's body gets upgraded to handle more enhancements throughout the story, the gameplay really takes a massive 180 shift from being that oddly slow parry or dodging heavy style where you do some okay damage and struggle against multiple enemies due to a limited toolset, to a more aggressive style where you're unleashing crazy combos between enemy attacks or even between your own parries and dodges, thanks to how they interweave Eve's core skills into combat, since as you're battling the various enemies of Stellar Blade, you build up 2 different kinds of energy to use Eve's various skills, Beta Energy and Burst Energy, with the latter being available later on in the game, and both of these type of skills, along with basically all of Eve's core abilities, are improved through skill trees by spending skill points, which are obviously earned through combat in the various activities in Stellar Blade. But Beta and Burst Energy are both built in different ways. Beta Energy builds up by attacking and basically being aggressive, while Burst Energy is built up by being defensive through the various dodges Eve can perform, which leans into the interesting color attack system going on in the game, which really helps make the combat intuitive thanks to the easy to read telegraphing of enemies and superb hitboxes. So basically you have blue, purple, yellow, and red attacks from enemies outside of their normal stuff. So when these kind of attacks are performed, Eve can react in different ways. With blue attacks, you want to dodge towards an enemy since it allows you to swiftly slide behind them, giving you a big opening to unleash a combo. Purple attacks allow you to dodge away and push the enemy back, leaving their core exposed, allowing you to deal heavy damage to them, which is best utilized with Eve's gun. Then yellow attacks are unblockable special moves, where your only option is to perfect dodge out of the way, which is basically done by dodging at the last second, and all of these are what build up your burst energy. Now, red attacks on the other hand basically mean an enemy is about to unleash a huge combo attack where you can take advantage of the parry system in the game. Since enemies have these little squares below their health, which represents their balance, and basically if you drain this balance bar, you can unleash a massive critical attack that will kill most normal enemies in one shot and deal heavy damage to bosses. Now, outside of all that combat goodness though, you also have Taki mode, which to put it in simple terms, works basically like a devil trigger from Devil May Cry. It has a gauge that builds up and you can use it when it's full, and the mode goes away once it's drained or you yourself end the mode. Pretty straightforward but super fun to use, and I really liked how this mode gets introduced into the game, which is done after defeating Eve's friend Taki from the beginning of the game after she's become corrupted, and this is something I just loved about Stellar Blade. All of Eve's biggest upgrades are tied to the story and really adds to that feeling there's truly a reason why Eve is becoming this unstoppable machine. Though I wished I loved all of these upgrades equally, because I truly have a love-hate relationship with the drone. So the drone in Stellar Blade has two functions. One is to scan the environments to show various objects around the world, and the other is to attach to Eve's arm and act as a gun in combat, which both of these functions can be upgraded by finding these modules hidden throughout the world. And these upgrades do various things like increase the drone's scanning range or unlock new ammo types, which there are 5 of. But with that said, the drone can feel very clunky to use at times and almost counterintuitive when exploring the world. Like in general, the more I progressed through the game, got more upgrades, and learned how to interweave it into combat, I really was loving the gameplay switch up it provided to me, definitely in the moments where Eve's sword got disabled and turned the area you were progressing through to almost this survival horror-like experience that I absolutely enjoyed, but there's 2 major drawbacks I absolutely disliked about the drone. The first is how you swap ammo types with the drone. Basically, you have to aim, hold down on the D-pad to bring up a wheel, then select the ammo you want to use. This is super annoying to constantly do in combat. I really wish what they would have done is keep the wheel, but allow you to hotkey 3 different ammo types to the other 3 D-pad buttons, since they serve no function while you're aiming your gun, so you could quickly swap ammo on the fly. Really would have made for a much smoother experience, and this somewhat applies to health consumables and utility items like grenades as well. With how they are both tied to the D-pad, it would have been nice that instead of being forced to open a menu to swap an item when you're completely out, the game would just auto-select the next health item or utility item in your menu or wheel, so at the very least, you don't have to pull a menu up to do it, but the option is still there if there's a different item you would prefer to use. And obviously these menus don't ruin the game for me, I just think they could be optimized better to allow the player to stay engaged with the world and combat without touching the menu so much during longer combat sections. Now, as for my second issue with the drone, it's the fact you can run out of ammo, which this of itself isn't an issue to me. I like the fact I have to be wise with my ammo. I mean, for God's sakes, I love survival horror games. But my problem is the fact there are so many hidden areas or puzzles that you can run into out in the world that requires you to shoot your gun, and having it so when you're out exploring, having the time of your life, engaging in the mechanics and world of the game, just to run into a brick wall because you don't have ammo is annoying, because you have to stop what you're doing, run back to camp, which camps are like your unlockable resting areas that act almost like a hub, where you can fast travel, upgrade Eve, respawn enemies, and so on. But back to the drone, you have to resupply your ammo and run all the way back. I really believe it would have been nice if when you were completely out of ammo, the drone defaulted to shooting basically a harmless airburst. That couldn't hurt enemies, but allowed you to still engage in the exploration mechanics that requires you to shoot. This would in no way make the game worse. It would only enhance the experience without question. At least that's how I feel about it. Which, speaking of exploration, while the combat of Stellar Blade honestly weirdly reminds me of a more tamed version of Metal Gear Rising Revengeance, and yes, I'm serious about that, put those games side by side after you unlock Eve's full toolset and tell me you don't see it at least a little bit. but the platforming gives me this old school Devil May Cry vibe. Like, the platforming really brings me back to the old days of the action combat era of the PS2 and Xbox 360, which makes it really fun to explore the world, and I truly do believe they do a really good job of it, even though there are some hiccups, like climbing, grinding the hyper tubes, wall running, and the crazy laser rooms where one touch Eve is dead are all fantastic experiences, but stuff like rope swinging and making minute movements with Eve can be a little touchy, which over the course of the game can get annoying at times. Though if I had a recommendation when jumping on platforms with Eve, she will stop on a dime if you let go of the thumbstick. It's almost like you're trying to control the horse from Elden Ring. Obviously a lot better than that, but generally the same concept. Which, while I'm on the topic of concept, the concept of Stellar Blade's world is one I'm fully invested into, and despite the obvious inspirations from games like Nier, there is a very unique style that when it pops out really shows that Stellar Blade is so much more than a copy of other games, and this becomes super apparent towards the ending areas of the game, where you're going up to the space station. The artistic style and how Eve meshes with these areas, and even the monsters, it really feels like this is what Stellar Blade's true potential is when artistically everything fits together perfectly. Though this did plant a little seed into my head, and one I invite all of you to really think about. Why does it feel like these early areas of the game feel almost out of place for a character like Eve? Or why some of the other characters feel so odd in this world? They're all machines, and there's no set way machines are supposed to look. They are created and can have an almost unnatural, uncanny valleyness to them, which is something that happens even in real life with some of the machines that have been built to look like humans. So looking at it from that perspective, if you had different people or beings creating machines how they see fit, they could look like they come from completely different worlds. Now, is this the reason the characters can look so out of place in Stellar Blade? Probably not, but it's just a perspective I thought I would throw out. But the real question is this world even worth your time exploring? It absolutely is in so many ways. Outside of the combat and platforming, the various side quests of Stellar Blade, besides obviously helping make Eve stronger, and a lot of them having a fetch quest-like quality to them, adds so much context to the story and characters, and drives home how the world ended up in this state. Plus, exploring and doing these side quests open up some of the bigger features of the game, like being able to style Eve's hair and fishing, which I got to say, this is by far my favorite fishing minigame in a game like this. It really is fun, and I'm going to be honest, I probably wasted a good 10 hours fishing in this game. I really did, and I don't regret it, since catching fish rewards you with points you can trade in for materials. Also, besides that, you have an endless supply of outfits, glasses, and earrings to find for Eve, so you can really customize your looks. Though I think one of the coolest parts about collecting items in the game is it fills up your companion Lily's affinity bar, which if it's maxed out not only unlocks an exclusive story mission, but allows you to get a third secret ending in the game, which I thought was really cool. Rewarding the players who take the time to grab collectibles in a game with something meaningful is always a win for me, because it really adds value to engaging in that kind of content, which I should also throw out. All NPC shops also have their own affinity bars you can fill as well through buying stuff from them, which unlocks additional items. So even basic mechanics like buying items is rewarding to the player and really leads to exploring every corner of the world of Stellar Blade absolutely being worth it. Though, if there's one part of the open world exploration I feel somewhat let down about, it's the overuse of boxes. These damn boxes you can drag around are everywhere and is used way too much in exploration in the open worlds. Like, yeah, none of the stuff related to using the boxes may be designed poorly, but it's just lacking variety. If I wanted to play UPS Worker Simulator 2024, I'd go get a job as one. Outside of that, though, I do believe the general level design of Stellar Blade is amazing. It provides an interesting mix of environments to explore, some truly cool puzzles that I absolutely enjoyed doing that broke up the gameplay nicely without overstaying its welcome. Though if there's one thing I wish could have overstayed its welcome, it's the bosses in Stellar Blade. The bosses are fantastic. The designs, music, and environments for some of them are going to go down as some of my favorites of all time, like Belial. As you're making your way to the orbital elevator, he comes after you, resulting in two different boss fights, with the latter having one of the best soundtracks I've heard this year, and the boss fight itself is like a gauntlet of survival that requires you to beat him not once or twice, but 3 times before you can finally bring him down. This is one of those fights I think is going to be known as a fan favorite that people will go back and talk about. Then the environments for the Karakuri and Demon Crawler fights really captures the essence of what defines the art style of Stellar Blade, while fights against Raven really hammers home how fantastic this combat system in the game is. Then finally, one of the coolest parts about the entire game for me is the fact there are 2 different final bosses you can fight based on an interesting choice you can make at the end of the game. I love this because it really promotes replayability, definitely when you consider how much changes in New Game Plus, which not only adds additional upgrades, skills, outfits, and more, it also changes up enemy placements, which is a great way to get around the fact that the enemy variety, especially when running around in the open world sections, can get pretty stale if you're not beelining through the main story. Definitely when you're constantly fighting those damn turrets and lurkers. Both of these enemies I just found super annoying, especially when fighting them in groups mixed with other enemies. Like, no joke, group fighting enemies in this game can be really awkward at times. Like, some of the enemy designs just don't mix well together with how they can stun lock you, though I will at least give them credit for not making any annoying water enemies to fight, since it made the water sections of the game a lot more enjoyable. But with that said, let's go ahead and talk about what I've seen a lot of people be split about: the story.
Wow. What a place.
Oh my goodness. It's full of plants and little birds.
I'm just going to say it, I really liked it. At first when I dived into the game, I wasn't sure what to think. Landing on this planet to kill these monsters known as Natibas for something known as Mother Sphere to supposedly save mankind had my attention, but didn't blow me away. But as I progressed through the story, got to know Adam and Lily more, seeing Adam kind of poke at Eve about the Natibas and the world, planting that seed that the world is so devoid of life because of the lack of humanity in it, and how it's almost terrible for one's sole purpose to be nothing more than an extermination of a species, which over time you see this progression in Eve. While her voice lines are super robotic at the start of the game, as you get further in, she slowly starts showing more and more emotion, to the point you can really see her understanding what it means to be human and to make your own choices. How over time she goes from trusting Mother Sphere to no longer even acknowledging her because of the trust she held so hard onto is nothing more than a potential fallacy. And you can see the effects of these questions really make Lily distraught, because she wants to so badly believe Mother Sphere is this loving god to all, when in reality she's nothing more than a super-powered AI machine created by Adam, who is the last bastion of humanity's DNA, and this demeanor or lack of personality is because he's literally the cause of everything. So in terms of the main cast and voice acting, since I've seen it be such a hot debate around the English voice actors of Stellar Blade, I think when you approach it from this perspective, you really see the finer details in the performance of the voice actors. Definitely when it comes to Eve in specific, Lily and Adam I am still split on, mainly Lily. Her voice just doesn't match well to me, and as for the various NPCs in the game, I'm also split on. I think something like Sue and Enya are fantastic, which also Enya's backstory is probably my favorite in the game. Really enjoyed it, but others like Kea can be a little weird, though I will say during my second playthrough, I played with the Korean voice cast, and while across the board it seems way better to me, I do miss those charming moments from the English cast that make some lines just funny to hear spoken.
Well, it must be nice. I'm surprised. All this time I thought you were just a freak.
Now, with that said, there's 3 issues I had with the story. The first one was the reuse of bosses. Both of the sections that featured the survival horror-like sections, where you couldn't use Eve's sword, reused bosses. You have to basically fight the same bosses to enter these places, and fight the same bosses at the end of them. This felt really lazy and gave these sections of the game a strong copy-paste feel to them. Next is the fact when you're returning to Zion after it's been attacked, it should have featured a section with Eve walking through the town, helping out people trapped under rubble and talking to them. This could have been a cool way to build up to the first fight with Raven. Maybe even could have had some Naytiba she brought with her that you had to fight in the town to flesh it out even more. Finally, the ending sequence with the Demon Gorgon feels a little underwhelming. Instead of just floating in space, charging up your railgun a few times to win, which was super underwhelming, you should have had an epic section dodging attacks and debris to reach the drone because you guys got separated when thrown out of the station, so you could fire the final shot to kill him. Would have just been a little more interesting. Like, those final sequences of the game from that moment to the end feel very rushed. While I really enjoyed the story moments and boss rush, the pacing was just a little off for me. Either way, I truly believe Stellar Blade is a wonderfully designed game by Shift Up. All the parts come together to create a fun experience that is complemented so well by one of the best soundtracks I've heard in a game. And despite the many issues I mentioned, this is easily one of my favorite games I've played so far this year, and with some simple tweaks to the formula in both combat and exploration, its sequel to Stellar Blade could easily be one of the best games ever made if it matches the technical quality of the first one. Now enjoy Eve staring you down for staring at her for too long.